My name is Peter Adams, and I was one of those involved in the gas forum from the days before it was born. At the time, I was working as general counsel with AGAS, and having had a long history in the energy industry, I'd moved to AGAS in 1991, which was right at the start of the opening of the market. I'm a lawyer, and AGAS was in fact the second entrant into the non-BG gas market. Roland, I think you followed me as chairman, and do you want to say a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. I'm Roland Sheard. I was the second chairman. Unlike Peter, I'm a humble engineer, a chemical engineer, but unfortunately the industry didn't seem to want me as engineer. So I spent 25 years with British Gas, the old British Gas, selling gas to industry. I ended up leading a team selling gas to the power generation business, the so-called dash for gas. And I then was totally disloyal and joined National Power, the electricity industry, set up the gas department buying gas for power stations. We did some trading and had a small retail operation. In those days, though, the people in shipping were of many backgrounds, very different backgrounds, different industries. But Peter, you were the key to setting up the gas forum. How did it start? I've almost forgotten.
You flatter me, Roland, thank you. The early entrants into the gas market were required to enter into point-to-point transportation contracts with British Gas, the part of British Gas which became Transco, and in fact it was a separated out, ring-fenced division within British Gas. It was an interesting time. In AGAS we once estimated that each transportation agreement cost us around about £150,000, so it was quite a significant barrier to entry to negotiate those agreements. In any event, point-to-point very quickly started to break down. To land gas, to contract with Transco that you would land molecules of gas at a particular terminal on the coast, and then that they would cleverly find their way down the gas pipeline all the way to the particular customer that you had nominated, was a system which really wasn't going to survive the opening of the market, the fact that you wanted to land gas at different terminals, and the fact that your customers were all over the UK as well. And so as the market grew and opened, those point-to-point transportation agreements broke down. The next step was to cover them by an umbrella agreement that tried to sort out the multiple entry and multiple exit points, but even that was not really very satisfactory as a way forward. The Monopolies Commission had looked at the opening of the market, I think back in about 1988, soon after the Gas Act, and it came back to review the market in 1992, and the result of the report by the Office of Fair Trading, as it was then, was that the market had not achieved very much in the way of opening, and the solution was to introduce a mechanism called release gas, which I think Roland's going to talk about in a moment in any event. Alongside that, many of us recognised that the point-to-point transportation agreements, in fact everybody in the industry I think recognised that the point-to-point transportation agreements were not going to work and could not survive very much longer, and that what was needed was some sort of common contract, which subsequently became the Network Code. The Gas Forum was formed because there were several competitors that had entered into the market, and we needed to speak with some sort of common voice and sit and negotiate with British Gas Transco. And Ofgem also wanted to have a single counterparty with which it could understand and speak to the industry itself. So we set up a meeting, we arranged for the organisation of the Gas Forum. It was agreed that we would set up the Gas Forum. Lovells, the solicitors, were invited to draft the constitution of the Gas Forum. It wasn't a particularly difficult task, but there were two key elements which I think have survived to this day. And the first was that it was to be a democratic organisation in which shippers and suppliers all really had a say in how things were going to go. They might not win the argument, but they had a say in how things were to go. The second thing was that since it involved all of the competitors in this area of the market, it was important that it had very strict rules about compliance with competition law as well. So to make sure that we didn't run into problems with the competition authorities. So both of those factors were featured heavily in the Constitution, and I believe they still do. So that's the background to the Gas Forum. But Roland, I wonder if you'd like to say a few words about how it was that competition then started to increase and get going.
Yeah. Speaking with a lawyer, it's rather difficult to say this, but I don't think changes in the law were ever going to get competition going. Sorry, Peter. But because the large producers didn't want to sell tiny volumes of gas to new suppliers with indifferent credit ratings when they could sell it to the large, reliable British Gas. However hard a bargain British Gas did drive, they paid their bills. So it wasn't going to get started, but what set the ball rolling was what you mentioned, Peter, which was the gas release programme. It was agreed between the OFT and British Gas, and they sold tranches of gas to independent gas suppliers on very, very advantageous terms. It was totally unfair to British Gas, but it worked. The next step to full competition was what you mentioned, Peter, the network code. Essentially the rules of the game. There were three parties to the negotiations: Ofgas, BG Transco and shippers, largely the Gas Forum members. Peter, do you remember those endless meetings, those endless long meetings to set these things going?
I remember them well. I remember the Scandic Crown Hotel sitting on the banks of the river opposite Canary Wharf, which was young in those days. I don't remember how long we spent negotiating the network code, but I do remember how the meetings went on, and different sections of the code were considered at different times and developed. It was an interesting process. It was an interesting process partly because we were breaking new ground. There was no precedent for the type of agreement. Of course, there were plenty of examples of transportation agreements, but there was no precedent for the sort of entry-exit type of mechanism that we wanted to set up in the UK. And I have to say that a number of people stand out for their success in the way that they handled that. Brian Withington led the British Gas team, and his team did a very good job of presenting the various ideas and the reasons why you had to adopt various conditions on the way that you accepted entry and exit, the things that are in the network that still exist in the network code today. On our side, there were a number of strong voices: Caroline Harper, Roger Turner, Mark Cobway, Mark Petterson. And the ring was held, and very diplomatically held, by Mark Higson of what was then Ofgas before it became Ofgem. He did an excellent job of not interfering very much with the negotiations, but being a presence at all the negotiations and being able to act diplomatically to twist people's arms or persuade people, generally speaking, during the coffee breaks and away from the actual negotiating arena. And thus the network code was born. I wonder now, Roland, how you think that has developed and competition has developed with its with the network code.
I think the process worked, and it worked well because it was fundamentally an open process with nobody there wielding a big stick. Perhaps a contrast with today. The three parts of the industry were really working together. As for achievements, well, one, for the Gas Forum at least, we had some members who you could say were slightly unreasonable. They were commercially wanting to keep what we knew as monthly balancing. Many of you now won't know what that concept is. It is so wrong. It doesn't work. But we kept talking within the Gas Forum, and we finally won. But the main achievement, and one which has spread in various forms throughout the world, is entry-exit. It is an elegant concept of, I think, genius. Who thought of it? I've no idea. But without it, competition could not have got going so quickly, given the multiple gas terminals in the UK. And those multiple terminals meant, as you've mentioned, Peter, point-to-point transmission is impractical. Not only was entry-exit a breakthrough, but it unwittingly provided Europe's Henry Hub, the NBP, the National Balancing Point. It was neither designed as a trading hub nor expected to become one. It just happened, and trading largely moved from the gas terminals to the NBP. Do you agree with my perspective, Peter? Or are there other key points in the code process?
I agree with most of what you've said, Roland. I will beg to differ on some of the issues that you've raised. But I think that as we move on, I think we should probably pay tribute to one other party in this. And that was Denton's, and particularly their partner, Charles Wood. Charles was responsible for leading a team of people who actually wrote the network code in its original version. It is, while it's a complicated document, it's complicated by the engineering that it supports, but it does support the transportation system very well. It has proved to be a model that others can follow, and I think Charles Wood and his team at Denton's deserve the same sort of accolade as, for example, Fiona Woolf has in electricity. It's a model that has been exported to other countries, and it's a model that has been quite successful in terms of providing a template for multiple entry-exit gas transportation systems. We've moved a little bit away from the Gas Forum, and I think we should go back, since this is a Gas Forum lunch, we should go back to the foundations of the forum and what's been successful and what's been unsuccessful. So I wonder if you'd like to move on to that subject, Roland, and add anything.
Well, until I saw the operations of Ofgem, I had a very positive view about economists and lawyers, Peter.
Thank you.
And I've kept my high opinion of lawyers, but economists, I don't know. Our relatively simple model of the network code has somehow been broken up. The economists in Ofgem seem to think that if a series of processors exist, each must, if possible, become a market. And all these markets, these multiple markets, create barriers to entry with little gain. For example, making meter reading a separate market, and the ludicrous situation where LNG terminals were being built at Milford Haven, which obviously needed a pipe. There had to be a bidding process. It's absurd. The terminals were being built, a pipe was needed. National Grid have a certain return allowed, so a tariff could have been produced immediately, but oh no, Ofgem wanted it as a bidding process. While Ofgem and Ofgas under James McKinnon and Claire Spotswood stood up to the politicians and ran a tight ship, it now seems to have lost its focus as Ofgem. It does a daily newsletter. Managers are called partners. Endless consultations with no real customer input, and no attempt to tell the public, the great British public, of the real position of UK energy prices, because they'd be lambasted by politicians. I don't want to say Ofgem is all bad, they're not. They're doing some great things, but there are some issues. Peter, I am sorry about that rant, but I have to get it off my chest. Perhaps you've something more positive to say.
Well, this is a time to laud the progress that the Gas Forum has made. And I think the first point that we should really make is that the Gas Forum in its original form, of course it's adapted to change and it's grown and all the rest and all those things, but it has lasted the fire of being put into use. It's lasted for 20 years, and I think it is laudable to all of those involved in the Gas Forum and keeping it running forward, that it plays such an important part in the day-to-day running of what is a very successful gas industry in this country. So I think the first and most important thing to say is to applaud all of those people who have kept the Gas Forum going and kept its essential ethos of being reasonably democratic in the way that it reaches its decisions. When I look back, when I was the chairman, which was the first couple of years of the Gas Forum, I was always rather sad that I was never able to persuade the managing directors of the various companies involved in the industry at that time to spend more time looking further forward and trying to spend more time shaping the industry into the future. I failed. I suspect that's probably a failure that has continued to this day. I think there are bigger forces at work, and I think but I would always encourage the Gas Forum to step back from the industry and look at the way that it wants to see it develop, and try to make sure that it influences that direction of development as much as it possibly can. But it's not been a bad story. It's been a very good story. It's been a very successful time for the Gas Forum, and I think that it has contributed hugely to the success of the gas industry. Now I know, Roland, that you have something else that you wish to add as an anecdote to demonstrate some of the failings of the industry as it's developed.
I can only speak about our mistakes. We only made one, of course. We made no other mistakes, but it was one which got a bit of publicity in the industry at the time. It was a simple mistake in those very early days. We were overnight submitting a bid to buy some gas, and we submitted it in pence per therm, which is the natural unit. Unfortunately, the computer system used pence per kilowatt hour. For the engineers around, I will point out, we had bid 29.3701 times what we intended to bid. So we had a very large bill to pay, 29 times what it should have been. But luckily, and Peter will approve of this, we had a good lawyer. Mm-hmm. She argued that it was what she called a manifest error. That is, there was no meeting of minds with regards to price. Now, any of you who are lawyers will know that means there wasn't a contract. So the deal was void, and we won. In fact, this incident did what I think was a lot of good. Other shippers had been warned, and obviously we always want to help other shippers. In those days, did we not, Peter?
Of course.
Of course. But also my lawyer, who is now in the Australian energy business, it's one of her favourite anecdotes, which has a moral for everybody. So that was my one mistake. I've been a bit negative in some ways, but can I end on a positive note, Peter? On my office wall, I have a picture of my signing the network code on behalf of National Power, and I look at it every day with mixed thoughts, perhaps, but I'm proud.
And that was the starting history of the Gas Forum, and I think we both sit here and we wish the Gas Forum every success into the future. Very
much so, in an uncertain future with these politicians around. But let's hope, let us touch wood.